All right. Okay, everybody, thanks for joining. I appreciate you taking the time out. So the presentation we're doing today is on SharkSQL, and some of you may have seen this update from my colleague Wolfgang Berger, who's based in Vienna, and he's on the call with us now. So right out of the bat, I'll say I'm not a DBA, but I have had DBA experience, a little bit, but I'll go through our backgrounds here in a second. But this is going to be an update on, if any of you have seen this presentation before, this will be an update on where everything is at. It's not moving. So we're going to do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to just do a very brief introduction. So myself and Wolfgang, and then we're going to talk a little bit about why another database. You know, this has always been a big thing in the industry these days. Is even when MariaDB came out and MySQL, everybody was saying, why do we need another database? So we're going to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about what's coming in the futures and talk a little bit about things that you may not have heard about a little bit, but you know, we're going to talk, and if you have questions and things like that, we'd be more than happy to go over it. So we've got a couple of slides on technical overview, performance, really wild performance results, and we'll go through that. And we're actually using PG Bench, which is the Postgres SQL standard benchmark that comes with Postgres. Some T's and C's, and just a little bit of a hint, it's going to be freeware. So it's following the Linux model. So just to give you a heads up on that. We'll talk a little bit about security. And there's some interesting things in there if you're interested in, you know, the higher end security and things like certificates and things like that. You're concerned with some of those type of things. The management CLI, much simplified than the traditional database type of thing. And one of the things you'll probably see is, and we've got lots of good Oracle guys in the back to guide me if I stray off too far. But one of the things that I've certainly seen is within the industry, it's not just VMS that has problems getting really good support guys. So the database world, you know, they're like VMS guys, like they're getting older, and the new people coming up are not as knowledgeable about databases. So they're looking for more simplified databases that, you know, SQL is a good language, but it's cryptic and you got to know what you're doing, and you have to have DBA type concepts in your head, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Roadmap and futures and Q&A. So a little bit of a background. So Wolfgang is a colleague I've known for many years. He's got a PhD in physics, as well as being a very senior software architect. So you know, he's got a wide range of application programming, and he was a strategic advisor to some of the big lotteries in Europe. Back until he left HPE in 2019, and he founded a startup company called WDB Tech, and his goal was to do SharkSQL development, basically, which is at a high level, it's a SQL standard compliant distributed relational DBMS system. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And again, emphasis on easy to use features that you would expect from an enterprise level DBMS. So we're going to talk about things like features that requires the programmer to know, like two-phase commit and things like that, putting it back into the database layer. So two-phase commit is embedded within SharkSQL. Enhanced security and data protection features. Multi-platform support is a big one. So this is all, the reference platform is OpenVMS, but it also runs on Windows. And unfortunately, I didn't know we had to use this laptop here, but I could have shown you how it's running on Windows, latest version, which is still in pilot. So it runs on VMS and Windows today, Linux in the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a slide or two, but it's also now running up and running on x86 for VMS. And performance. This is a big thing that Wolfgang has been focusing on. So my background is I'm not a DBA. I mean, I've done some level, what I would call level 1 RDB support. Way back in the days, well, probably remember back in Colorado where we went for boot camp of 6 weeks of RDB training. And I did a little bit of tech forums. Don't tell me. Oh, I was going to say, remember, Brett, the demo gods are not with you or some days. But what my background for the last 10, 15 years has been on data center migrations. But my passion is still with OpenVMS. I still have a VAX, Alpha, and Integrity in my lab that's still up and running, that type of thing. Obviously, I don't keep them all turned on for power reasons, but the thing about that, which has given me, I think, a pretty good perspective, is I deal with mainframe, Solaris, AIX, Windows, Linux, smaller amount of OpenVMS, all of these different platforms. So I get to see all of the problems that when you have to move something, all these problems that you come up with. So, I think it's given me a pretty good perspective on not just the problems with VMS, but also the problems with other databases. So that will be a good transition into talking about where, we think that the database world is going in the future. Okay, so why another database? Okay, so for OpenVMS, basically what this is doing is just another option for OpenVMS. So customers today are all about options. As things get retired or they have to migrate, they need to think about, or they want to think about options that they have available to them. And that includes cost, performance, compatibility. They've got a lot of legacy applications, which are not easy to port. So, they need to take that into consideration, but they also have to think about future support. So if you've got a database that has a lot of complicated syntax and things like that, then maybe the future is a database which much simplified CLI, embedded two-phase commit, all of these type of things for doing distributed database management that, might be of interest. Deployment, as I mentioned before, is on OpenVMS, single code base. So you can actually run it on OpenVMS and literally copy it, that database, to Windows, and with a few config file changes, you can actually connect to it and manage it just like as if it was on OpenVMS. So you don't have to do export, imports, and things like that. So improved IT security to meet increasingly sophisticated threats. I don't have to tell you guys that security is number one on, or number two on most customers' concerns today, especially when we're talking about their data. And so one of the options that are here that we'll talk a little bit more in detail is packet level encryption versus session encryption. So with with the typical SSL and you connect to it, you've got session encryption. So for the life of that session, you're protected. But if you wanted more security, you wouldn't have to worry about that, and it would get the packet level. So the next packet that comes down is got a different encryption key. So that's an option for people who are really concerned about security type thing. Distributed transaction performance. So one of the things that we're going to be talking a little bit about is in today's world, you have to think about not just the latency between the app server or the web server and the app server, and then from the web server to the database server. You have to be thinking also about firewalls. Most customer environments have firewalls in the middle. So each of those latency things, when you're trying to scale up, impacts the overall, what, for lack of a better term, I call solution latency. When you look at solution latency, one of the things that you can do is consolidate the app and the database and maybe even the web server on the same OS instance. So you save on OS costs, you save on licensing, and from a security perspective, there's one less zone to worry about. But to that point, some people might say, well, you know, that means putting app web database on the same server. On the OpenVMS environment, we've been doing this for decades. Everybody, you know, has been doing multiple applications on the same server instance. So that's a good reason for choosing OpenVMS. Now, can you do it on Linux and Windows? Sure you could. You could run the web server and the app server and the database server on the same instance. But the culture of Windows and Linux, if you talk to those guys, they wouldn't think of it. You know, so they would still keep everything separated. They're still stuck in the traditional 3-tier application environment. Wide range of connectors and interfaces available. And we've got a couple links that'll show you. So that's a really big one. So MySQL and MariaDB wire protocols are all fully supported by SharkSQL. So if your applications today are coming in using any one of those wire protocols, it'll be supported with SharkSQL. DB management CLI is similar to DCL. So this goes back to the concept I mentioned earlier about making databases simpler for programmers. So if you remember, DCL is show object list. You know, so in this particular case, you can do things like show table XYZ, show this, show that, and you don't have to do a lot of the complicated SQL type stuff to manipulate it. All the different objects, you know, to get the information that you're looking for. So another biggie is support subscription model versus upfront licensing or any other type of licensing thing. So basically, if you think about the Linux model, where it's free on the internet, but if you want support, then you get support subscription. So this is doing the same model. So that includes security patching, regular patching. All of this is all included and it'll be available so you can download, load the latest patches, whatever you want, type thing. And that's a pretty big deal when you think about some of the free, actually, I should say freeware, not shareware. Just notice that. There's a bit of a difference there. But that's a really big deal for, you know, free stuff on the internet often means, well, if you need patches or security patches and things like that, you got to pay for those. And in this case here, it'll be available. And this is a big one, the last one here, reducing IT costs. So, and I see this a lot in the data center migrations because over the last 20 years, the overall industry focus was on reducing hardware costs. So the x86, you know, server sprawl, all that kind of stuff, when they put it onto VMware and that virtualized it. But the challenge is that's about all you can do from a hardware savings perspective. If you look at where the next 20 years is going to be, it's going to be about reducing software costs because they still want costs of IT to go down. But if you've virtualized everything already, there's not really a whole lot of room to save on hardware costs. So that's why I think you see today a lot of customers looking at how can we reduce our software costs and what, give me some options, that type of thing. So just a quick overview. It's an enterprise level relational database, SQL standards 99, partly 2013. It's 100% cluster aware on OpenVMS, so you know, fully homogeneous cluster type thing. And Norm and I have had that conversation about row caching and things like that in the past, but it fully supports OpenVMS clustering, multi-scheme, multi-file. And basically from a file storage area perspective, it relies on the OS. So if the storage array is supported by the OS, it's also supported by SharkSQL. And distributed remote database. So basically you can do an attach or connect to an existing database on different systems. And then you can manage it using the Shark management commands, just as if it was local. So you don't have to do a lot of complicated connects and things like that. Today it's available on OpenVMS and Windows, Linux in the future. And I mentioned the development plan is OpenVMS. And Also, this is kind of an interesting one. So it's a single code base with 0 third-party add-ons. So you don't have to worry about third-party licensing, third-party implications, that kind of thing. Data integrity guaranteed beyond database boundaries. So basically what this is saying is that two-phase commit is embedded in the product itself. So again, simplifying the environment from a application perspective. Once you do the various updates or commands to different databases, and you say commit, then it gets done, and the prompt comes back. It's actually happened on all the different databases. Or you get an error message back, and like the ACID principles, where if it isn't completed, then it has to be rolled back. You can have a cluster-wide database cache, 256 megabyte to 1 terabyte. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to jump over some of these. If anybody has any specific questions, I'll ask Wolfgang to comment on these. But based on the from a user perspective, it's based on role based. So, and this is an important thing, I think, is that the data, this gives the partner or customer, the DBA can be separate from the sysadmin, because a lot of people have concerns about a sysadmin on a system. You can do anything on the system, but this is a separation of roles so that the sysadmin or the system manager can do certain things, but they can't go into the database and change data and things like that just because they've got system creds. This is separate. Supports pessimistic and optimistic concurrency control at the table level. And most DBMSs support only one or of them. And this supports both at the table level, so you can actually update it. And this has to do with the level of transactions hitting the same data at the same time type thing. Extended security features. We got a slide on that. I'll get to that in a second. Easy to configure, also for newcomers. And this is a really big focus, is that, as we mentioned earlier, the new application developers coming out of universities and things have very little database experience. They just want to get a database up and running. They want it to do certain things. They want to be able to back it up certain times and things like that. But they don't want to get into the overall database world where it gets quite complicated in terms of setting everything up properly. So this is all about usability, and this is, I've been talking about it a little bit here, but the idea is that out of the box, you get reasonable performance, and you don't have to do any complicated things to get some basic level of performance up and running, or an acceptable level of performance up and running. There's no expert know-how required. Basically, when you install it, it asks you how much memory you want to use. It looks at how much memory is on the system, how much do you want to use for the database cache, and it asks for a password, and that's about it from a setup perspective. Easy enhanced security features. So basically, if you're using the SharkSQL client and the SharkSQL server, one of the key things is that you don't have to depend on per session security. You can actually have per transaction security, or pardon me, per packet security. And that's a big deal for people who are worried about certificates. And like SSL is all based on certificates and things like that. And there's always this, who really has access to these certificates, and backdoors and all that kind of stuff. But if the key is changing with every packet, then there's no chance that anybody's going to be able to, well, I shouldn't say no chance, you never say never with security, but very little chance that that's going to happen on packet level encryption. So remote and grid access, again, this goes back to remote management. When you have a bunch of distributed databases using any or most of the different databases. There's some complicated commands you have to do to set up and make it work. And here it's just, you just connect to it with a username, password type thing. And once you're connected, then you can start doing commands, update, insert, delete, anything like that that you want, as if it was local. Consistent method to navigate through all database objects. So one of the things that this is simplified management interface is you don't have separate utilities to remember separate commands type thing, right? And I know, well, remember this when you're doing support, you have to remember RMU // which might be different than other stuff, right? And it's the same with all the other databases. They all have separate utilities for doing separate functions within the database. So in this particular case, when you're at the SharkSQL CLI, you can say backup, you can say do task scheduling, like if you want backups to occur at a certain time every day or every week, that type of thing. So again, all about usability, making it simpler for these new DBAs or new new application programmers coming up in the future that don't have a lot of database background. So now we get into the interesting stuff. So PG Bench is a standard benchmark that comes with Postgres. So it's out of the box, you get Postgres, you get this benchmark that you can actually use and use for testing performance. And what it is, it's updating 3 different tables where 50, 500, or 5 million records with insert and selects. And essentially, this is what the benchmark does. So this is the benchmarking that Wolfgang did with MariaDB. These are the versions that he did use. And the only changes he made were in the dot here. These are the only changes that he made before running this particular benchmark. And with Postgres, he did the same thing, with the different versions. And again, the memory adjustments he changed, basically just to make it a little bit more runnable. Oracle on OpenVMS was 7.3-32. So I think that's pretty current. I know 7.4 I just heard out that it's out now too, but. And pre-release of SharkSQL version 5. And these are the changes that he made on that. So this is the read-write benchmark. It's like a TPCB-like test. So you can tell what's in the blue is the SharkSQL results. So it's pretty important or pretty impressive just from those results there. And this is just using out-of-the-box PG Bench benchmark utility. I like to call it the wow effect. Like to get anybody to look at an option for another database, you got to have that wow effect. And we've described it in here. Anybody can run this. Like when it's available, it'll be available. For Windows and OpenVMS, you can do these benchmarks yourself just to validate. So these are just different examples of what we were seeing with the benchmark. This was a read-only PG bench. Again, another part of that benchmark. So that's just a example from a performance perspective. You need that wow impact to get anybody to look at a new database. So simplified user interface, excellent performance, runs on OpenVMS, Windows, and soon in the next little while will be Linux as well. One of the good things if you look at it from a security perspective, because that's where a lot of people are focusing these days, security, is the database history on SharkSQL tracks all database metadata modifications, including those from the DBA and min. And even the DBA and min can't mess with the audit file. So if you had a corrupt bad guy DBA and min, you might be able to do stuff in the database, but it would be logged as to what he did in the audit file. The only way to really impact it is when you drop the database, and of course, that would take out the database, and that's the only thing you can do. But that's, security guys typically say when they get hacked or anything like that, they want to know they were hacked. It's one thing to be hacked, that's bad enough, but it's worse to be hacked and not know about it. And that's what this provides. Data encryption can be enabled or disabled per table. Each data page is encrypted with a different encryption key. So if the data was changed and you go read it back, and that brings back that different key associated with that particular data, it'll say the data has been changed, type thing. And so you have to work really, really hard and understand the whole database itself, the database internals, to be able to detect that particular feature. And yeah, so the encryption keys are calculated based on the database schema, table, and data page attributes. The data signature. This is where, actually, this is where I was just talking about, is I skipped over the other one. But basically, the data signature is, like I was just saying, is the signature is stored with the record, so that when you read the record back, it reads back the signature, and that way you can do the compare. So my apologies, I messed that up a little bit. Okay. So from a security constraints perspective, you can set these at any time, assuming you're the DBA and min. So you can set that on no insert, no update, delete, no delete dynamically. You don't have to, quiet the database or stop the database, that kind of thing. You can. So, and one example where that might be used is a lottery. Everybody's updating the database. It's a heavy write type environment for the first initiative, that type of thing. And then at a certain point, once it's closed, you don't want any updates type thing, right? So you can lock it down at a specific time. So no delete, no insert, and no update. Again, it's kind of saying what I was just saying. You can do this dynamically, so which is a good thing, depending on the nature of the business, end of day transactions, things like that. You want to be able to dynamically set these type of features on the tables dynamically.
How do you set that?
Sorry?
Can you say you set something to no update? Can you change it to table?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but Wolfgang?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'll repeat it here. So the second bullet says no update can be set for columns, partitions, and tables. So once you've set it for no update, can you reset it back after?
Yeah, you can remove the no update flags for sure. Yeah, that admin can do everything, but it's tracked in the history of the audit table of the database, so you exactly know what has been done. Yeah, you can set it, and then a table can consist of hundreds of thousands of partitions, and you can set these flags on individual partitions. And if you say, okay, I want to get rid of it and I want to truncate it or something like this, you can remove the flags. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So when we start talking about network encryption, this is where we get into that whole, when you're using the SharkSQL client and the SharkSQL server. So you can actually set it up so that you don't need to do the SSL type security. So you can actually, because some people, SSL is secure, obviously, but some people always have a worry that how secure is that key really? If you look at the different providers and people working for those providers and things like that, right? It's but if you were so inclined, you could set it up using this, so you wouldn't have that worry about that kind of thing. And the chance of somebody cracking packet level encryption is much, much slimmer than SSL. Yeah, and one of the things I was going to mention about this whole concept here, and this goes back to what Wolfgang has put together in his background as a PhD in physics, but basically the peers independently calculate the initial key using a quantum mechanic eigenvalue equations. So I have no idea what that translates to, but I know it's a lot of math, and basically it makes it very, very secure at that packet level encryption. So SharkSQL is what we like to say is a true distributed database transaction engine. So that includes embedded two-phase commit to ensure distributed database consistency. So if you're interested in ACID type relational database, like really need those type of things for bank level type mission critical type computing, this will be of interest because again, it's making it simpler for the new application programmers to not have to worry about all the technical aspects of two-phase commit. Most databases can be connected directly from the client or via an access server, and it's the same for both. You connect, once you've connected, then you can do commands locally as if the databases were local. No risk of piggyback security holes. So this is one of the things where I don't want to get into too much details because I'll get myself in trouble. But basically, when you connect to an access server and from that access server you connect to another server, there's a danger if it's not done properly. You could have almost like a, I don't want to call it man in the middle, but there could be a hole or a point in time there where you might get caught. And with this, you don't have that worry. And there's no statement limitation. So once you've connected to that remote database, there's no limitation on any of your command statements on the remote DVMS that restrict you from doing anything. So if you connect to this server and then to that server over there, and you say back up this particular server or whatever, that type of thing, or that database, I should say, it'll just do it. And one of the things about this is Wolfgang has put in a lot of emphasis on SQL standards and following the SQL standard as closely as absolutely possible. Everybody knows SQL defines a lot of things, but it doesn't define everything. But for the stuff it does define, there's a very high focus on making sure it follows the standards. And as I said, and I repeated, is the client always has a local view of all connected databases, regardless if they're attached or remote. So from an application perspective, that makes it very easy to work with. So I talked a little bit about the SharkSQL CLI. So it has all of the standards fully compliant to the DDL, DML, and DCL. So your select, insert, update, create, alter, drop DB, grant, revoke, that's all standard SQL type stuff. But the SharkSQL management environment is very DCL-like. So for people who know OpenVMS and show this and update this and things like that, that's all part of that. This is just a continuation of the Shark management language. So things for database management, client migration management, lock management, data structure analysis and repair, all of these task scheduler. So if you have a database or some work-related activity that you need to do at a specific time every day, you can do that within the CLI. And I've already mentioned that it's very DCL-like. So I talked earlier about the connectors and interfaces that are supported today. So natively embedded SQL is C only. Other languages in the future. CVM module processor. It's comparable to the Oracle RDB SQL module processor and the C API. And if you're using MySQL or MariaDB today, any of the connectors or APIs that they support, SharkSQL supports. And by the way, I don't know if everybody knew this, but MariaDB was just recently purchased by a venture, what you call them, venture capitalist or whatever. So private equity or something like that. Yeah. So it's they were purchased by a company called K1. So if you want information about that, which has caused some people to, who knows what's going to happen, right? But you know, it's K1 and MariaDB. Just Google it, and you'll see all the articles about that. Now, if the demo gods are with me, this shows you the. Oh no, it doesn't. No, never mind. Not gonna play with this and mess it up. But if you go to these links, you'll see pages and pages of different types of connectors and things like that that are available for MariaDB and MySQL. By the way, just to add a little humor in that there, how many people knew that MySQL, MariaDB, was developed by the same guy? How many people knew that one of his daughters is named Mai, and his other daughter name is Maria? Mai. Yeah, Mai is the. I was watching a YouTube video and he was presenting. He said, "Oh yeah, I did this." A little bit of trivia.
And he sold mine to Oracle, and then he sold Maria to K. Sold his daughter.
Does he have any more daughters?
How many more daughters?
Oh, I'm not touching that one, especially if it's being recorded.
Okay, he's got a son for a shot.
Oh, yeah. Seems like when you flip screens. Okay, so terms and conditions. So as I mentioned before, this is going to be freeware. So basically the Linux model where it's on the internet, it's available. You can download it. You can play with it. You want to try it on Windows first before you put it on OpenVMS, but that's where your critical apps are.
Does free mean floss, as in open source?
No.
Or does it mean freely distributed in binary form?
So glad you asked that. So this is not open source. It is closed in the sense that it's a private maintained type thing, but free in the sense that you can use it. And so, I mean, I don't want to get into the OS religion here, but one of the good things I think about this particular model that we're looking at here is you get the benefits from a cost model. You know, like you're not paying that upfront CapEx expenses. The only thing that this is doing here is it hits your OpEx, and OpEx is your operations expenses, which operations manager at a local level can approve. If you've got expensive licensing model upfront, that is that's CapEx, and that requires a senior guy to approve. OpEx gets approved by the local operations manager, and it's a one-line update. So this will be support professional services. So as we're going to mention in the next slide here, and there's the email if anybody has any questions on this, or if they would like to follow up later this week or next week or something like that. We've got the email addresses. But this is the roadmap. High integrity, x86 Windows, So field test releases for the supported versions in Q1, so January, March timeframe. And production releases in Q2 of next year, Q2, Q3. So some futures. What's in the plans are a Linux port, database shadowing. So you'll be able to do replication shadowing at the database layer, as opposed to, so if they don't have shadowing up and running, you can do it at the database layer. Adding some new SQL features. RMS file mapping. So we've had some discussions this week, offline over a few pints, talking about different tools and how to get data in and out of RMS and things like that. So that's something that's going to be looked at. Native connectors instead of just using the MariaDB and MySQL. Improved server integration with MySQL and MariaDB. There are a lot of customers out there running MariaDB and MySQL. And as Mick was saying, as Brett was saying in his presentation this morning, that whole application migration type thing, a lot of that depends on that server integration and when you're doing that porting and that. So the more that can be done at the database layer in terms of making it easier for the applications to get at the data, the better it'll be. And so additional data migration utilities going from one database to another and that type of thing back into SharkSQL. So I'm just going really quick here in the interest of time. So from marketing perspective, we're looking at this quarter and next quarter, getting our website up and running. And we've got in draft mode right now. We're going to be putting up white papers, presentations, blogs, so type of thing. One of the big things we want to do is build and promote an end user community forum. That's really, really critical. And this goes along with the whole open source versus closed type thing. If you don't have that end user community behind you, giving you new ideas and what about this and what about that, then you're in trouble type thing, right? Because then you're just relying on what you perceive the requirements to be. How to and SharkSQL training. So we're looking at things like YouTube videos. The application guys today will typically, or not application guys, but the younger generation, they want to go to YouTube and watch a 10-minute video. And if it's longer than 10 minutes, then they don't want to do it, right? Discussions with potential field testers. We're interested. If anybody's interested, drop us a note and just say I'd like to be on your list of trying it out from a field test perspective. Webinars or web-based meetings. We can do Teams meetings. We can do whatever you prefer. If you have somebody at your own site that wants to get more information on it, we can do that. And again, if interested in participating, just send an email to this address here, sharksql@wdb-tech.com, and we'll make sure we get back to you. So on that note, with a few minutes remaining, I'll just open it up. Any questions? Go ahead.
Data file layout, is it name value pair or record order?
So hang on now. Say that again.
Is the table organization a name value pair concept?
It's a table organization,
Name value pairing
name value pairing
or record.
or record. Wolfgang, are you there?
Yeah, yes, please repeat it. The question. Can you repeat the question?
Table organization,
Table organization.
is it name value pairing
Is it name value pairing
or is it record?
or is it record oriented?
Well, this is the classic relational database, and the relational database is always record oriented. This is you have an hierarchical organization. This is always the same. You have the database on top, then you have your schemas, and within the schemas you have your database object, and one of these database objects is a table, and the table consists of records. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not object oriented. This is a different approach. This is classically a relational database model. And you just define your relations between your tables and your data, and yeah.
Yeah, so it is very much a relational database, so keys and things like that is, it's part of the relational model type thing. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, there's at least a couple of different approaches to doing keying. Use the RMS model that are in record, but there's also a way that you can export the keys to external files. Just wondering if that's an option.
Is it possible to export the keys to another file? I don't know if you would do that in a relational database, would you?
The key. So let's talk about what do you understand with a key? A key is what do you think? Is it an index or a primary key or a unique key, or is it the database positional key? There are many keys inside a database. Which key you mean?
So he's talking about index keys.
Index keys. Yeah, well, if you just want to export the keys, the columns that form an index to a file, yeah, that's possible. You can export like in any other database data to any CSV file or a binary file or however you want. It's just a question of your query. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, appreciate everybody coming today, and we'll be around for the rest of the conference here. If you want to chat or anything like that, feel free. Thank you, Dave. And thanks to Wolfgang for appearing all the way from Vienna.
Okay. So wish you a nice evening. Well, it's early in the afternoon in the Boston side, so it's in the evening today here. And yeah, good luck with your conference.
Okay, thanks, Wolfgang. I'll chat later.
Yeah. Okay. Bye. Wish you all the
Bye now.
best.